Okay, I'm going to show you kind of the big steps of making these cute little birds here. These feathers go in after they're fired for the second time. Legs can be made out of pipe cleaners. They can also make little feet out of clay if they want. Some kids opt to not have wings made out of clay, and they'd like feathers sticking out of that. So you can just poke a hole here if they'd like feathers sticking out of the side or feathers sticking out of the back. Just make sure that there's a hole wherever they want these cute little feathers at the end. Okay, I'm gonna take those out just so you can kind of see the holes. So these are made with a pinch pot, and pinch pots are kind of this pretty simple thing to do. My daughter got hers more like a dish. It's not really a pot, and kids tend to make them really, really wide. So keeping their thumbs close together is really helpful for them, and making sure it doesn't get too thin. This is about as thin as it should be. It gets really fragile and breaks off. So make sure that it's not too thin. Too thick is also a problem because it doesn't dry in the center, and it makes it explode in the kiln because it's still wet, and the wetness turns to steam. And if this eyeball is really big, bigger than a grape, then it has to have a ventilation hole or it will explode in the kiln. So step one, they will have a ball of clay. Okay, the best way to kind of get the air pockets out and get clay moving is by wedging it. And here we just throw this ball, we kind of slam it on our desk. Kids love to do this. I'm just going to keep working it around. It's fun and it gets it moving. Once they've done it 5 or 6 times, have them kind of use their hands and make it into a ball. Then kind of pack it around. That also gets it moving. And once they have it into their ball shape, what they're going to do is they're going to press their thumbs down in the center of this ball all the way down to the knuckle. Now my ball's a little bit bigger than theirs because my hands are a little bit bigger, so I'm going to make sure that's the right weight for them. And once I have that hole down the center, if it's to my knuckle, then I don't have to worry about it being too thick here. And then using my crabby claws, so this is like one finger in this, and I'm going to pinch it kind of with this together, but keeping my thumbs in close to keep it into a pot shape. Now if my thumbs stay like this, when I'm working my crabby claws around to just kind of pinch and squeeze the clay, it stays as a pot and doesn't widen. It's still going to widen a little bit, but if they're mindful of keeping their thumbs together, it won't turn into a flat dish. You see, it's kind of staying into a ball, and that's very important. And you're just going to keep working it around, making sure it's the same thickness all the way around. And I'm just going to kind of feel and measure. The top is usually fine, but make sure it's not too thick either. Okay. These cracks right here in the clay, sometimes it happens when it gets a little dry. You can spray with a spray bottle. I like the kids just to wet their thumb on their wet towel, and it smooths out really well. Just kind of back and forth, up and down, and just that little bit of wetness. If it's too wet, it turns slimy. So have them just wet their thumb or their finger and just smooth out all these cracks. Back and forth, up and down, to get those all smoothed out. All right, so when they have the shape that they like, if they want it like more like a dish, they can do that too. This is kind of what kind of bird are they making. When they get to this point, when they've got it exactly what they want, it's going to lay like this, like more like a turtle shell. So you want to make sure that they have their name inside of it, because it's just to get it out of the way, so you're not trying to hold on to it with eyeballs and feathers and stuff. So having their toothpick, you want to have them scratch their name in there. Not all the way through. Also, if you're in Madame Bohr's class, you want to have them put the teacher name just in case there's a bunch of classes in the kiln together. So if I'm in Madame Bohr's class, I'm going to do B02, because Breholtz is also B. So if I do B02, I know that that's Madame Bohr's class. and kind of pat it down in there to get all those little sharp pieces and make sure that my name is right. Okay, so when they have this the way they want it, then they can set it down, and if it's thick enough, it'll be really sturdy. The clay will shrink a little bit also when it dries. Okay, now I have my main body, and now they can make wings out of the other piece of clay that you have for them, make their beaks, make their eyeballs. When they are ready to glue on those parts, they need to use vinegar as their glue. So here's my eyeball. I'm gonna roll out this eyeball here. I'm gonna work it out. Make sure it's round the way I want it. Now this is kind of a big eyeball. Most people want to have a pupil anyway for their eye. So like this one here, we use this kind of pointed dowel to make a hole in that. So if I want my eyeball to face this way, I can press this halfway through my clay and wiggle it around a little bit. It creates an air hole so it can dry in the center and it won't explode in the kiln, but also makes a cute little hole for a pupil. When I want to attach my eyeball, we need to use slipping and scoring. So scoring is taking where you want, say I want my eyeball right here, I'm going to score it, which is scratching X's or hashtags into my clay to bring up little pieces to bond with the other part. Now I want my eyeball to sit like this, so I'm going to flatten out where I want it to sit so it'll attach really well, and then I'm going to scratch into the eyeball also, so it's plenty of things to bond. Vinegar is our glue, so you can either spray it on your finger and rub it in, or you can spray it right onto your eyeball. Only one spray, too wet, it'll slide off. Then I'm going to, so this is the wet part of my step. I'm going to wet it. I'm going to wiggle it to get all those pieces of clay together. And once it's wiggled in there, then I'm going to twist it into place. Which way do I want it to face? I don't want it to stare at me. I'm going to spin it around until I can twist it to where I want it to face, okay? And then I'm going to pull on a little, make sure it sticks to there. I can almost lift this whole thing up. It's stuck on there so good. Kind of suctions and bonds, and then you know your eyeball's not going to fall off. So continue that process with the wings that they've made. They can make wings just by kind of hand shaping, like kind of a wing shape. They can add pattern and texture to these wings. There are pieces of pasta. There's a stick. They can add texture to their wing. They can add shapes. I like to have them use a separate piece that's not their wing to make sure that they like it before they put it on their wing. This pasta, you can roll it out and it creates some lines. You can press it in. This one does the same, makes little marks, or you can roll it to create texture. This one makes kind of a scalloped edge. They can use these on the body. They can use them on the wings, whatever they'd like to do. So once they have their wing shape, so say that's the wing I want, and put a little texture on there. So now I want to attach it the same way that I did the eyeball, okay? This one you can't twist as much, but you definitely want to still wiggle it. So I'm going to score it, wet it, and I'm going to wiggle it on there, making sure that it creates a bond. And I'm going to kind of pull on it, and it sticks right on there. It's perfect. Wiggle it a little more. When they've had their eyes and their beaks and their wings on, then you want to ask them where they want their feathers to be. If they want feathers in the top, they can press and wiggle. You push the stick all the way in and wiggle it around. You want to wiggle it because when the clay shrinks, the holes will get smaller, and you want to make sure there's enough room for the feathers to stick in. You also want to create leg holes for them. So right in the front of the clay, below their beak, if their beak is right here, I want to put a hole here for their feet. I'm going to press it in, wiggle it around. On the inside, the pieces of clay kind of branch up and become really sharp. So you want to press them down with your finger to make sure they aren't too sharp. And also checking their name to make sure that it's legible when you poked holes in there. They want a hole in the back for a tail feather. Do the same thing. Press my stick in, press these pieces down so they're not too sharp. If they want to make clay feet, they are more than welcome to. If they need more clay, always make sure you have some in the class. And they can use this to create little feet for their little birds. Same as with their bodies, you want to make sure that there's a hole there to hang these feet. So if this is my foot, I want to make sure there's a hole here. Pat it down, make sure it's big enough that when it dries and shrinks, there's enough room to put a pipe cleaner in there. And on the bottom, you want to have them just write their initials. With their toothpick will be better. RW. So I know whose feet they are. And when they're drying on the metal tray, you want to put them right next to their chick. And I will put them inside when they are in the kiln just to make sure that they stay together. This eyeball is really big. This is about as big as a grape is what you want. So if it's this big or bigger, it has to have an air pocket in it. So I've got an air pocket here for that. And because this eyeball is so big, I will probably create an air pocket from the bottom too, just to make sure that it does not explode in the kiln. So then I have two air pockets, one you can't see at the bottom and the other through the pupil of the front. Nobody wants a missing eyeball. All right, and when they're done, these have to dry for 2 weeks. And then I put them in the kiln for the first firing. They will come out kind of an off-white color. And then you get to let the kids glaze them in another class. To make sure their glaze is not on the bottom so it doesn't stick to the kiln, and let them pick a couple colors and they turn out really, really cute. The feathers and pipe cleaners we will add after it's fired for the second time, right before we display them for Art Fest. So enjoy!